All right, we are started, and Steve is talking very briefly about the PWSH dash dash help problem.
I would say a problem. It's an ask.
An
So
ask, yes, it's a
yeah, so this has just started in the little chat window. Basically, Justino was just asking, and I'm gonna maybe elevate it to more of a higher level, which is, on Unix, it's the convention is to have a single dash for the short version and the double dash for the long version. Should we adopt that convention for specifically the PWSH executable?
got it.
We're probably not going to do that for commandlets because we have PowerShell has its own conventions. We already kind of adopted some of this, like for getting the version information and I'm trying to remember now. We did some other stuff to kind of align, like the interactive. I think we did a dash I and things like that. I know that we have previous conversations about kind of like going all in on this, and there was some pushback from the team. I don't remember exactly all the conversations. I'm open to reopening that discussion. I think that we should have an issue for that. I don't think I saw one for that. The one that was linked to in the chat was more about the commandlets, adding an alias. So I think that's a separate thing from PWSH itself. But again, I'm open to the conversation, and we should just have that discussion with the community to figure out the pros and cons and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, my inclination is to say, hey, that's like a huge breaking change. We could potentially never support like the dash single char argument and just also support dash dash for people who know that semantic. But I will read the issue and get up to date on it because I'm sure there's a bunch of nuance that I'm not considering.
Yeah, and again, I'm saying that I'm scoping this at just PWSH and tag commandlets. I think just adding the dash dash should not be breaking because those should all be additions.
Right.
But I know that we do have some. I think we have some that would conflict and would not make it consistent. I'd have to double check what the solutions that we have are now, but
Yeah,
I think that,
that would be
I
my
think
other question is do we already support the combination of multiple single character arguments, right?
yeah.
And if we do, then yeah, you could theoretically construct words that don't work for the single dash, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think we have. I don't recall exactly, but I think we have one at least one problem there that would be a breaking change if we went that route.
Got it. Okay.
But we can have that conversation in an issue. I think that'd be the way to go.
Okay. All right.
I mean, if it's only for help, that's much more constrained, and that to me doesn't seem to be a problem.
Great. Yeah, I see you here, just yeah, that's what we're discussing here. It's just that that's breaking with the norms that have been there for PWSH for a long time. So we would just have to figure out how to reconcile those two worlds. For a combination of single character arguments with dash, we may break with some.
All right. So while you're typing that, there was a question about turnaround time on recordings being posted.
Oh yeah,
I know that we have not been doing an awesome job on this. I think that we've slowly gotten a little bit better.
Didn't the last one get posted pretty quick?
Yeah, I mean, there's two different aspects. One is getting posted, and one of getting the PR merged.
Right.
So, Joey and I are kind of responsible for that, so we'll try to do a better job on getting those posted. Maybe like a 1 business day turnaround seems reasonable.
Well, I told them I'll get it up this week. It looks like the last one was merged 23 days ago, so I got it up. I got it up the day after, and we merged it 4 days after that. So I'll just bug you harder to merge it next time.
Yeah, you should do that.
Okay. But yeah, no, I told Thomas I'll get it up. I'll get it up by this week for sure. Pound sign requires would solve the dash dash problem. Actually, I'm kind of interested in that. Could you speak to that a little more, Tobias? Yes, that is on purpose, Mike. Sorry. Hopefully you're. I think everybody can see the chat window, and I'm going to post the transcript later. So
It's probably Minesweeper that's in that black window.
Oh, the black window blocks it. Okay, that's so annoying. I'm sorry, guys. That's way more annoying. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to get his desktop set up. If I can get this to work. it's Skype just refuses to get small enough. Okay, you guys are stuck looking at this here. Okay, so you can specify the PowerShell version by requires at the beginning of your script so you can prevent breaking existing stuff. Yes. Yeah, our problem is that we're still very much consider a goal to have universal scripts, right? Like there's still a and potentially in many cases you're not in a world if you're shelling out to PWSH, you're not in a world where you've got pound sign requires, right? You're probably calling PowerShell from a Bash script or a Python script or something else, and so, or you may very well be, and so you're just sort of saying, hey, with whatever PowerShell you got on the box, like, run this script, or run this command, or invoke PowerShell and have it sit around and wait for commands to be run against it. So, hurts until you do that, right? Right, so it would basically you'd be broken until you found out about the magic pound sign requires switch. Changing the PWSH switches can make people, yeah, Puppet Chef, other things, exactly. So this is we made a lot of breaking changes in 6.0. Our philosophy, I think we should maybe talk about our breaking changes philosophy a little bit here. We discussed this a little last time, but we're really trying to limit the number of breaking changes, but also live in a world where we can potentially make them more continuously, right? And I think we really want to leverage the experimental flags feature to do this more, so we can have breaking changes that are hidden behind experimental flags for some period of time, and then we're able to turn them on. I know there's a debate going on about the experimental flags feature, about whether we should have experimental features in production-ready builds, as it could cause a lot of headaches with support. I'm going to add that as well here because I do want to talk briefly about the experimental feature flags RFC. As well as the MSI installation RFC. Sorry, those are the two things I forgot to add these. But yeah, it's just, we want to make them, but we want to make them in a way where very early up front when they're going to happen, what the mitigation is for them, and we're not sort of breaking this this concept where we're able to ship scripts that are going to operate against both Windows PowerShell and PowerShell Core and many versions of PowerShell Core. And so, these situations where you're low level enough to potentially cause a lot of breakage, we're looking to avoid. But this one, I think there could even be a special case for dash help where it just makes sense because everybody runs that. So we should definitely investigate that. Anybody have anything to add there? Looking at who else we got on the call. Yeah, okay. Cool. All right, well, moving along then. Steve, do you want to talk briefly about where we're at with the 6.0.2 releases and the 6.1.0 preview releases?
Sure. So let's talk about the first one, which is a servicing release. I'm hoping that we'll get the 6.0.2 servicing release out today. The primary changes is really about picking up some .NET Core security fix, which it looks like they've already released. And we've been working with them trying to have a concurrent releases with them. In this particular case, it didn't work out, so we're going to continue to work with them to see if we can have a simultaneous release. One of the feedback I did hear is that the servicing releases do happen off of a private branch, and because we're primarily picking up security fixes, we can't, from a disclosure perspective, do it in a GitHub open source branch. Otherwise, we kind of, because it does take us a few days going through the validation and all that, it would disclose that what the specific security issue is before we can get it in the hands of customers for deployment. So that's the reason we have to do that in a private branch. Otherwise, all the feature type of work all happens in the open source. So that no change there. For the 6.1.0 preview one, I was really hoping we'd get that out sooner than we have. We ran into some, let's just call them compliance issues, where we needed to leverage some tooling that we had to get approval to use. And that's all been approved now. So now it's just a matter of balancing getting the 6.0.2 out, which will happen this week. And then my team will be able to focus on getting a 6.1 preview out next week. After that, barring any additional servicing releases needed for .NET Core, we should just be kind of quote unquote on smooth releases, 3 week regular cadence for the 6.1 previews. Keep in mind that if anyone wants to try out 6.1, they can just pick up the nightly build today. So you should, if you want to check out some of the new stuff, you can do that already. It just won't be a signed release.
Steve, you said we're moving a monthly cadence or
No, I see. We're still going to try to keep with our regular 3 week cadence. Is what we've been doing. The cool. 6.0 previews. We'll do that with the 6.1 previews.
Excellent. Thank you.
Maybe just add in the notes, people can pick up nightly builds today of 6.1. Or they can also just build it themselves.
And just to be clear, 6.10 is going to contain the fixes in 6.02, correct?
Yes, everything that is in 6.02, from PowerShell team perspective, will be in 6.1 for sure. I believe that the .NET Core team also forwards all their fixes in the .NET Core 2.0 into 2.1, which is what we're using for 6.1. Hopefully that all makes sense.
Is there a reason for using preview versus beta? Just curious.
I think that at least, and maybe Joe, you can add more here, which is when we originally, before we went GA for 6.0, we wanted to make sure people understand that there was a lot of infrastructure stuff that we had to build. Like the code coverage wasn't there. We actually had to basically build all new tests, working with the community on that. So the coverage wasn't where we want to be during the beta phase of 6.0. When we got to RC and GA, we did a lot of the analysis of where we still had missing code test coverage, and we were fine with the areas that we didn't have test coverage. So now that we've shipped 6.0 GA, and we're going to continue to increase our test coverage, but a lot of where the gaps are in error handling and also in specific commands, like the lesser used ones, so the amount of risk is low. From that perspective, we're not like in beta where things are questionable quality. Since we have a regular CI system and we're doing more and more nightly test runs, the quality of even the 6.1 previews, barring any new features, should not be, and again, barring any mistakes that we've made, should not be worse than a 6.0 GA. So from that perspective, it's not a beta in terms of quality. It's a beta in terms of like the new features, but that's why we're going with the preview nomenclature. And I think it also simplifies it. So we'll just, if you read the RC that Joey had posted in terms of what we're going to do going forward, having like the two channels, one is like the stable channel, one's the experimental channel, and we're just going to call one with no label and one with a preview label, and that's kind of how it's going to be going forward. So you can have those side by side.
Yeah, cool. To be honest with you, I felt a lot less strong about this one. Everybody sort of jumped on the bandwagon, like, let's go preview versus beta. I'm totally fine with it just because, like, really, it's just a name, right? Like, it's like community projects all over the place use different terms and different version schemes, and we had a discussion with some customers at the MVP summit that just happened around the versioning of PowerShell as well, 6.0, 6.1, 6.2. Why not do a 7? Who cares? What's the why are we going down this new model? It's all just naming stuff, right? And we'd like to get to a point. I think there's been sort of an implicit desire for a long time to get to a point where we can just sort of like update PowerShell and we can be confident that we're not breaking anything and ship a lot faster and just have a higher quality. We're definitely not there yet, but in this case, we're feeling a lot more confident than we were back in the days when we had 20% test coverage and had no idea whether or not we were breaking stuff as time went on. So exactly, not ready for prime time. Well,
I'm thinking maybe we should have said like 6.10 blockchain. And then that would also pick up a lot of eyeballs.
I have a quick question. If we're going to support text in version numbers, which is non.NET, can we extend the version type to handle these comparisons? Like, what do you do when there's two different words in the version series? How do you compare them? Or just stick with the .NET one and call it preview? I asked that question with no understanding of how sticking with numbers would affect the semantics. I understand how it affects semantic version processing on, like, hiding releases on Chocolatey and stuff like that, but I don't understand it any deeper than that. But it's a pain that the version type is not extended to handle what's becoming the primary version mechanism.
So I know that we have, and maybe Steve can speak better to this, but I know that we have the semantic version type now in PS version table, and that's derived from system.management.automation. I don't know if we have a string comparison there. There is like a major minor patch, pre-release label, and build label. If you look at psversion.ps-version, I don't know where we actually codify. Yeah, no. Steve, do you have more to add here? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank a little bit.
We did add the semantic version type, so that's not part of .NET or
Right.
Vex, it's part of PowerShell. And I believe, I have to double check on this, that we do a comparison. I think it's strictly alphabetical, if we have that at all. I'd have to double check on that.
So
But I'm
yeah,
sure.
so it's a bit of a pain when the built-in version types aren't either extended before we start using this kind of versioning, or we just stick with the old versioning and use the word preview to be a human readable thing, or we assign numbers to the words. So at least I could do a replace string and then use version.
Well, there is the semantic version does have a set of comparison operators. So the equality, greater than, less than, are all implemented for on semantic version. Whether or not it handles and understands how to deal with previews or additional tags is a different story. I don't know how it's implemented, but it is there.
So is there a type to use with it instead of version?
It's semantic version.
Okay.
So semantic version has implemented a set of comparison operators. If you look at the type, you can actually do semantic version. Whether or not it can compare, it's not able to compare directly with a system.version, but I believe you can I believe there's a conversion from system.version to semantic version.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we had implemented that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm just going to check right now.
Yeah, my follow-up question there, Darwin, would be where are you needing to do the comparison?
Yeah.
Is it from within PowerShell? Therefore, you're able to take advantage of this operator, or is PowerShell being hosted in .NET somewhere so that you have access to this type, or is this something where you're trying to compare the version outside of those systems? Purely in a NuGet repository or something like that.
Yeah, my use that I'm thinking of is PowerShell, but I also just think of like anyone else who's, I don't know, wrapping any of this. It would be nice if the straight version type was just able to recognize, oh my goodness, there's a dash in it. Let's presume semantic versioning or something. It's like a whole learning curve for someone to discover, oh, if I want to compare these, maybe you've got the name in the version emblazoned in the directory and they're trying to figure out what's the latest, for example. Like I have a routine that can set the command processor for OpenSSH based on searching through, folders if you wanted. Well, now how do I sort it, right? So that I know I got the latest one. All those kind of things become challenging whenever you have to do your own code over top of these structures when they get coded into actual artifacts that have not previously been aware of the new scheme.
Yeah, and it's no. Go ahead, Jim.
I was thinking that starting with a version, that is to say, converting from a semantic version to version is different than going the other way. And so if you're actually trying to compare, if you're trying to kind of start with a system.version and compare that with a semantic version, I don't know all of the permutations, and that might be problematic. We can look at that if that's the scenario.
It's more around the lines of, first of all, learning that you have this new type capability would be one thing. And I just tried it in PowerShell 5.1, and it doesn't have the type. So this is also only in 6.0.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's another challenge in that, a lot of times, for instance, Chocolatey packages are being processed by Windows PowerShell, even though they might be operating on on PowerShell core to install it or to determine something else about it.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case that semantic version is definitely a new type for PowerShell core. And the impetus behind that, of course, was because the semantic version is really not a Windows thing. It's a Linux, it's a non-Windows platform sort of deal.
So is this the kind of thing that would hit PowerShell standard and eventually get back into PowerShell Windows? Am I understanding?
We've been forward looking.
Yeah,
so
well,
it wouldn't be backwards.
I would proffer that we should do two things. One, we should look at how expensive, potentially backporting. If there's large demand here, and a lot of people really need this in Windows PowerShell, we could potentially backport. It's a very high bar for those things, but we do put it on the table. The other aspect is we can talk to .NET. And frankly, I think there could be a lot of value in .NET just having a native semantic version. I don't know if we ever talked to them about that in the past, Steve or Jim. I know you did a lot of that work. There's an open issue. Mark already knows about it, so go ahead.
Yeah.
I would say, too, that judging by user community feedback is a bad way to go because people are going to code around it before they ever find a way to report that, hey, it's crazy that this semantic version is now primary in a bunch of open source projects and not available. They're just going to code around it.
Right.
And this is going to be hours and hours of people time versus it gets backported because just logically it's going to impact like a huge portion of people. They just won't necessarily squawk about it.
Well, the other aspect of it is that I'm hoping that coding around it is a lot less expensive as long as we're consistently using like dash preview and that's it. Right? Like, ultimately, I don't think we want to go shove a bunch of other stuff in that label.
I was going to comment on that. At least if you either limited it to just one, or if you do another one, make sure it sorts out, ASCII sorts in a way that makes sense.
Which, by the way, I think is the historical reason for alpha and beta. It's just we hit this also with our 6.0 release, which is why most of you on non-Windows platforms never saw the 6.0 release because, as it turns out, apt-get and yum repositories also don't handle this super gracefully and have their own semantic for adding text labels to versions. So, it's tricky, but we'd like to just go to dash preview and just say, hey, this is, you see the dash, like, it's less than, period. But yeah, well, I'll talk with Steve about the Windows PowerShell thing, and it could be very dependent on the cost of the implementation there and whether there's risk in backporting it. But I think we should probably move along. I will get all of this in the notes before I post them. So. Quick reminder on PRs and issues. We just hit a couple of these yesterday during our committee call. Just remember to, if you're submitting new behavior, if you're changing the formatting of something, just post examples of what that's going to look like. We just would prefer not to have 3 machines open and repro in all different places and try to find out what's actually happening with a code change, and that would help us out a great deal. So that's it. Jim, I know you had some stuff on Script Analyzer. Do you want to talk about any of that briefly?
Well, Script Analyzer, as you might have noticed, we're getting. I'm trying to keep up with the PR requests. I'm a little behind at the moment. Apparently, when you say that you're ready to do some work, there's a bunch of work that arrives, so that's nice. We're looking at trying to figure out how to do a release. I'm trying to learn the tool set, and so we can build a release, and we have signing requirements and build requirements that are new for us. So I'm coming up to speed with all of that, but we're making good progress, and I appreciate all of the participation and interest that people have been exhibiting. So I don't really have anything more than that.
No, that's great. So it's I will use the word galvanized by the new commitment to working on Script Analyzer. Yeah, we want to and need to do a bunch of stuff there. So it's awesome that Jim's working on that. Steve, are you ready to have that committee call conversation?
Yeah. Just
but-
keep in mind there's a bunch of other things that popped up on the chat that we can get back to, but we
Totally,
can talk about
and I do.
now.
I'm actually going to let Sean. I think this release branch on the PowerShell docs thing is pretty brief. I just want to make sure he gets to that. This committee call conversation might go longer. So, Sean, do you want to speak to that one first?
Yeah, just wanted everyone to know about the release branch we created in the docs repo. There's been some PR submissions lately for changes to commandlet reference for new features that have been added. So we don't want to update the existing documentation. We want to merge those PRs into the release branch. So just keep that in mind if you're contributing for anything that is new features in the current build, the current
Preview release. Yeah. So we're just we're trying to compartmentalize those two things. We've also agreed, I think, that our 6.0 docs are going to be fixed forward. There's a lot of hassle in maintaining even the 4 versions of documentation that we have today. And given that we're currently adopting modern lifecycle for 6.0, and we're doing a better job of keeping track of our change logs and what's new in PowerShell and that sort of thing, we feel like having one 6.x doc set going forward is probably a good thing. So we'll just have this second branch where you put everything in as you add new features, and then we will take that and merge it over at release time, and the new set of docs will be for 6.1. Hopefully that model's all right with everybody. With Git, fortunately, we have everything forever. So if that's horrible and we need to go dig up archaeologically all the old docs, like we can do that. But I think it's just more important that we're codifying in the documentation, this parameter was added in 6.4 or whatever like that. That's, yeah. Cool.
Want to talk about the committee?
Yeah. Why don't you start there?
Committee meeting, I guess. So just so everyone's aware, like every Wednesday, we have the PowerShell committee meet to discuss issues and pull requests that are tagged for review. And we've been doing this for some time. And, on some days we might miss it because we don't have quorum. But generally we do meet and we have about an hour and we make those discussions. And then we have a kind of like a very terse summary in the issue or pull request summarizing the conclusion. Some of the feedback has been, we're not necessarily taking like a lot of notes during the meeting. So the discussion might be like 20, 30 minutes and we might just have like a one-liner conclusion. So I think one of the thoughts that we've had is maybe opening up some of those meetings to the community if you guys want to listen in on how those go. And I think the first thing is just to solicit some feedback, like is there interest to do that? So I'll just open that up for some discussion here.
Yeah, I think there were a couple models that we floated yesterday. One of them is that some set of the meetings are open and read only, so you guys can just hear and not really interact, and then maybe maybe that's the committee call right before the community call, and so we'll have sort of some good discussion points where people can sort of bring their feedback to the community call. There was some apprehension that sometimes you do need to have the closed door conversations because you do speak differently and limit yourself potentially about your opinions when you know that people are listening in. So we said, hey, maybe we'll do every other, or maybe we'll also open the chat for people so that we can sort of see, but we can continue having the interactive conversation. We also just discussed the possibility of just taking transcripts or audio recordings and just posting them online after the fact, so that if we do say anything dumb or reference an NDA project or something like that, that we're able to redact that after the fact. I don't know. I think that there are a lot of different things that we could do here. We obviously want to have more transparency. I think everyone ultimately desires that, but it's just a matter of how transparent should we be, can we be, and how much value is that actually generating for you guys? So but yeah, I see, yes, interest, transparency, availability, closed door meetings. Yep, they are good for some reasons. Transcripts with reactions are probably a good intermediate step. Yeah, and I think that was, we even said that yesterday. Like, let's just turn on a recorder right now and just see if we can transcribe it. We didn't, but we probably will in our next one. So I think what I'm seeing here, unless anybody else wants to jump in and speak for a little bit, is basically, hey, yes, we want it. There's value. Can we can take baby steps here and see how much value we're creating.
Yeah, so just, I think maybe we'll keep in mind that this is logically behind a experimental feature flag, so we'll try a few things and see what works well in terms of cost and value.
Yeah, and that's also true, Darwin, which is why we're trying to we're going to try to like do it one time and see how expensive the process of like releasing and all that is. But I think it could be pretty easy. We use some of the transcription stuff for like Channel 9 and stuff like that, and it's gotten pretty good. So
I hear an admin, yeah.
Yeah.
If only that easy.
Yeah.
If you had to estimate how many of the conversations you have during these meetings now would require redaction, like, do you have like a rough percentage, like 10 to 20%, or like every single one?
It's probably even less than that. It's probably 5 or 10%. But what we realized is that you sort of sometimes make offhanded comments about, oh, there was that stupid thing we did a long time ago, or, oh man, we're stuck with that. Wish so and so had never done that or something. And it's not it's never in mean spirit, but like you make these comments somehow, and you're like, they're it's I guess the product development equivalent of like gallows humor, but
right. And once it's on the internet, it's there forever.
Right,
so
exactly. So it's just that, like, hey, like watch how you talk a little bit, and just even that little thing in the back of your head could slightly change how you talk. But I think ultimately we're gonna give it a try and see what happens.
All right. I want to kind of maybe bring up on a related topic some changes in the PowerShell committee, because I believe we're closed on it now, right, Joey?
I believe that is correct, yeah.
So everyone probably is aware by now that Kenneth Hansen had left Microsoft, and Angel Calvo also had left Microsoft. And they were formerly the PowerShell committee leaders on the engineering and the PM side, respectively, although there were some reorg changes that kind of affected that. But anyways, so one of the recent changes, I submitted a pull request to update the governance document to reflect this, is that we're kind of getting rid of the PS committee leader role. For those who are not aware, like the role there is really if there was any decision that the committee themselves could not do, or if the leaders felt like they needed to veto our decision, they would both have to vote. One of them could not just vote; both of them had to vote to pass it through. So I think we really didn't have any situations where that came up anyways, so the need for that role didn't seem to be necessary. Jeffrey is still kind of like, he doesn't have a title in the committee, but he's, I don't know, like the czar or whatever you want to call him. So he has a lot of input anyways. But at least, even though Kenneth Hansen is not on the PowerShell team anymore, he is still, we voted, and he showed up at yesterday's committee meeting anyways, that he's going to be formally one of the PowerShell committee members, so that's just one change. Yeah, so there's more just an FYI of some of the changes that are happening and the reasons behind it. Should not have any impact to anyone outside of the committee.
Sorry, just capturing all that. Yeah, it's we have some people that are still very, very passionate about PowerShell, and I think it's been a goal from day one always to maintain that passion, irrespective of whether people are employed at Microsoft still. We very much have a commitment to doing open source right, and we're also having discussions about adding some community members potentially, or people outside the company that never started within the company to the committee, and that's all. It's all part of the direction we're moving in. Maybe we're not going as fast as some folks would like there, but we definitely want to foster that. So they are, like, full transparency. Both Anil and Kenneth are now at Amazon. So, we've worked with AWS in the past, as many of you know, for the original PowerShell Core launch. They have AWS Tools.NET Core that works great on PowerShell Core. So, we're very much committed to the ecosystem and making sure that we do the right thing across PowerShell and not just Microsoft. Cool.
See if there's anything else that we missed in the chat here.
No, it seems good. I just want to call out if anybody saw Travis's comparison of how the semantic version operator does work. I know we talked about the discoverability of that being a problem, but that is useful code.
Okay, so I see a question about PowerShell get.
Yes.
So I think we have any of those team members on the call. Speak up if you're on here, otherwise I'm going to speak on your behalf. So my team doesn't own PowerShell Get, PowerShell Gallery. It's one of my peer teams. But anyways, I believe I don't know if this is like public, but I think they recognize that there's a need to move towards NuGet v3. I think that they're formalizing a plan to do that. It probably won't happen anytime soon. It's not a small amount of work. There's a huge change.
I would call it an investigation at this point.
Yeah. But I think they do recognize there's a desire to move in that direction. So I don't think there's any specific time frame that we can talk to.
Yeah, and before either of us put foot in mouth too much, we should probably bring Keith Bankston in on the next call to discuss that, because he'll have a lot more insight into what's going on there and what we can and can't talk about there. So. Yeah, it's but yeah, we've definitely, there have been talks for sure. Okay, yeah, no, I think we want to move on to some of these RFCs, just if make sure people are aware of them. Dongbo has published, was it Dongbo, Steve, that published the experimental feature flags RFC?
Yeah, I think he worked with Dan Trevson on that one.
Okay. That's a long one. It's a really long one. I'm going to put the link in here, but the experimental features. Here we go. And look, like we should just say at a high level, like, we recognize that the RFCs are still a problem. We don't have a great plan there, other than, trying to spend just more time writing them, discussing them, responding to them, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, it's we know that you guys are posting them. A lot of the problem comes from the fact that we have business priorities, and very often, something will incubate within the hallways for a very long time. Experimental feature flags is a good example of this, and inevitably someone will get around to writing about it. One of the pieces of feedback that I've heard is like, hey, when you start having the hallway conversation, just open an issue. Just say, hey, like, we're thinking about this, like, hallway conversations are happening, and you should expect an RFC at some point or not. But just letting people know that this is even incubating, I think, is important. So I think that's one place where we can definitely improve. But as for the RFCs themselves, this one is, as I said, a long one. There's a lot of great conversation going on right now. The basic gist of the feature here is having the ability to turn experimental features on and off via some kind of flag, and that would essentially allow us to start publishing features into PowerShell that haven't necessarily been gone through the entire RFC process. So very often you get some benefit out of building a feature before you necessarily know where it's going, right? And we'd rather put code out into the wild and have people play with it, and then codify the RFC afterwards to say, hey, this is the way that the feature ends up working, like we still have these gaps, or find out that we should pivot the design in a certain way. So it's I hope that sort of helps somewhat deal with the RFC bottleneck, but I think the reality is that we just need to spend more time here. Do you have anything to add on that one, Steve?
Well, I'll just
Jim
add
or
one
anybody?
clarification, which is in our RC process, we do have an experimental status. So, like, I think we want to try to make the RC process as lightweight as possible. I do think that in many or some cases, having very long discussions in an issue could actually be easier as an RC. And the experimental flag doesn't necessarily mean that you don't author an RC. We can have a lightweight one to kind of get some initial feedback, do some prototyping to figure out what the direction before we commit it. Because after it moves out of experimental, then we have to then be concerned about backwards compatibility and breaking changes. While it's still experimental, it means that the design is not finalized, and we can still make changes based on community feedback.
I'm mixing shortcuts and I'm screwing up my. Oh my gosh.
Control Z, Control Z.
Oh, Control R. This happens when you have Vim key bindings and some of the VS Code key bindings still work and your brain is working in both ways.
Does that make sense?
Okay, so yeah, still will require lightweight RFCs.
You need a VS Code plugin that binds to your brain instead of to the keyboard.
Yeah, seriously, that's. All right, how are we doing on time here? We got 15 minutes left. I'm leaving stubs for me to fill in later. Okay, so I've also got an MSI installation RFC. Process quicker and address more RFCs. Okay, so the yeah, we've got this installation path one. This is purely to deal with the fact that it's not what I want. It's purely to deal with the fact that we need to be able to do upgrades and delta patching of MSI-based installations in Microsoft Update. We also just, there are a whole host of other reasons why having deterministic paths for a major branch is a positive thing. But basically, we're just saying, hey, instead of installing to like program files PowerShell 6.0, 6.0.1, 6.0.2, we're just going to install to program files PowerShell 6. And then there will be a program files PowerShell 6-preview, and you can always just know that like that one's got the preview build and that one's got the stable, and they're always in the same place, and your module path doesn't change, and there's just like way more determinism. So check out that one for sure.
Just so you're aware, MSI can also support multi-installation of the same package, but you've got to build the package right.
Yeah, there's Travis Plunk is our resident MSI guru. I guess he actually worked on a bunch of the infrastructure for like Microsoft Update and worked on WSUS for a long time. And so
it was a very late addition to a very late version that you could do multi-pathing of or multi-installs of the same exact package with the right package structure.
I doubt if we could ever patch that.
Oh,
so
there
I
it is.
doubt we could support that.
Okay.
We would have to build an exe wrapper around it, and the exe would have to support doing the patching on that. So that would be, yeah.
Messy.
Yep. Yeah.
I didn't know you were on the call, Travis. Good. Yeah, it's these Delta patches and makes my head spin. The product version versus the product line or something like that. It's just it gets very crazy.
And SQL Server supports that feature, and I worked with them when they messed up patching that.
So I just replied to you in the chat, Tobias, but were you talking about MSI, MSPs like for PowerShell Core, like you just want a better way to build those things out of the PowerShell project, or just in general you're hoping that somebody could improve that? Because I don't know if this is
actually even the original MSI command line.
I can answer. I mean, what's the complexity for creating MSIs? I'll be adding code to create MSPs. Right now, there's no way to create MSPs.
And MSTs, you can diff to MSIs like since the very beginning. So it's just maybe a lot of people don't have exposure to the API, right?
You actually couldn't, because we were changing components between every build of an MSI, so the diff wouldn't be possible to generate an MSP.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying you couldn't.
Got you. So it's not to do with the original technology. It's to do with the package structure is not completely compliant. Got you.
Yeah, it was far from completely compliant. I actually have already submitted the changes to make it patchable. I just haven't done I've done the work to make it, to do the MSP generation. I just haven't cleaned it up and submitted it. 602 came up. Yeah.
Travis, so for Tobias's use case, if he's got an MSI and he wants to make an MST, he could just copy the same one, edit it, and diff them and get the result, right? All in the command line, if that's one of the concerns.
Now after 602 you can.
Well, I mean, if you're just using that MST with that exact package and never an upgrade, then you should.
Oh yeah, you can. But you'd have to do some changes to the generation.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pivot here a little bit because we do have 10 minutes left, and I know this is you guys can probably talk about MSIs for for a long time. I think we can move on to this SSH stuff. I do want to address this just because I haven't had a chance to talk with Darwin since the last call. We moved very, very quickly on some of the changes that he talked about, and I would have loved to validate them with him. As many of you know from last time, we discussed the fact that OpenSSH as a client is now going to be on by default in future versions of Windows 10. SSH as a server will continue being a feature on demand. Darwin, what we did, there was an issue around the fact that, hey, when you put ssh.exe in System32, you're breaking everyone's path because there are tons of people who are using existing implementations of ssh.exe, and you're gonna break all of them because you have different key stores, different configurations, all kinds of stuff. I spoke with somebody at another major company that's doing exactly the same thing. They were like, this would be very, very, very bad. And I think they echoed all the sentiments that you brought up, Darwin. So A, thanks for bringing it to my attention. B, we've moved it into an OpenSSH subfolder, and we append that subfolder to the path. So we will take last precedence in the path, and then anything that you already have in your path will continue to work. This doesn't mean that we won't be in front of any SSHs that you install after that also append to the path, but I think that's not a contract that we plan on maintaining. So curl and curl.exe is a great question, Kexi. Did you want to speak there, Darwin? Sorry. I'll get to Kexi.
I was just going to say perfect. I mean, I think that's a great balance you struck there. Thanks.
Awesome. No, thank you for bringing it to our attention, because seriously, we were like 24 hours kind of thing needed the turnaround. So it was a perfect timing, and we really appreciate it and lucked out on this one. Kexi, on curl and curl.exe, very good question. Obviously, those aliases have been removed in 6, right? We don't plan on maintaining that going forward. To be honest, I hadn't thought about it, and someone posted, I've known that tar and curl were going into Windows for a while. I've been using them in insider builds, and I saw a blog post yesterday, and someone said, wait, what are you going to do about the alias thing? I was like, oh man, I haven't even thought about this. I don't know. I think we probably can't take it out given how many people use it, and given the fact that curl.exe will work. I think this really rolls up to what are we going to do about aliases altogether? And I think pretty much every plan that we've had there has involved leaving Windows PowerShell alone. But we're living in a brave new world. Curl is in Windows, so I don't know. Steve, do you have any other thoughts here? Or does anybody on the call have any thoughts around how we avoid breaking people?
At least for Windows PowerShell, I think you brought up the major point, which is we're trying to keep it stable by not making changes. And we're unlikely to make any changes in Windows PowerShell in regards to aliases. And for PowerShell Core 6, we still have the open issue on the bigger discussion about all aliases all up. So I don't know what else to say at this point.
Aliases are always preferred over OS exes, right?
Yes, aliases take the number one precedence over everything.
Would it make sense to have a control that says never use OS exe even if it accords to something in my code? If I'm like wanting to be pure PowerShell.
So this one, so I don't understand, because in this case the alias does already take precedence. So what's the
No, I think the point is there a way that we can essentially turn off native code execution?
Yeah,
Don't know
I'm
why.
just throwing it up there. I don't even know if it's a valuable thought. Sorry.
Yeah, because PowerShell is still a shell, and so native executables are part of the normal PowerShell command set.
Yeah.
It's not something strange or foreign.
What about not executing them when they don't have a .exe extension or don't have an extension?
Well,
they don't get executed without an extension.
Well, like right now, if I type curl, it'll go with this, but I have to type curl exe to get a native. I have to type exe to get a native. To disambiguate it when I'm calling it, when I'm not. Just a thought.
Yeah, the command resolution is designed specifically to hide stuff so that you can do wrapping. So it's supposed to do that. If you happen to have two commands with the same name, it's easy to get around that with native commands because of the .exe extension. The problem comes in on Linux.
Non-Windows platforms, right?
Yeah. With the extension, there are no extensions.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a bummer that we're stuck with a curl alias on Windows PowerShell, but I'm hoping that by moving everything forward on PowerShell core that we can just sort of work that out of the system. But obviously everybody here knows that takes a really, really long time. I think we also it's probably valuable for one of us to back channel with Daniel. I'm blanking on his last name right now. That owns the curl project. He was very vocal and extremely, despite the trolling and stuff coming in from Hacker News, was like very polite and insightful with his original filing of the alias issue back when we first launched open source. So, it's I think just gut checking with him and making sure that this is still possibly reasonable and that we are addressing this in PowerShell core going forward, I think would go a long way. So, yeah. We have 4 minutes. Does anybody have anything we haven't addressed? I see Jim kind of flickering on the thing. Do you guys have anything to add?
No. Actually, let me just add one thing that we didn't talk about, which is editor services. So Patrick let me know because he was unable to join this call, and Tyler's on vacation right now in China, that the PS Reline support should be coming in soon. Editor services plus plus. So hopefully that will show up soon, because the idea is to have a consistent interactive console experience everywhere versus the dual personalities of ISC versus PowerShell.exe.
Yeah, and there's one other thing that we talked about at the summit as well, but that I just want to inform people on PS Readline related. We don't have an ETA or a timeline yet, but I think we know that we need to ship PS Readline 2.0 in order to fulfill some accessibility requirements, mostly screen reader support. That's currently in pre-release. There's a bunch of awesome new features there, but there's I'll say very good chance that PS Readline 2.0 is finalized and will eventually make its way into Windows PowerShell to replace the PS Readline 1.x branch. So, we talked about how there are very high bars for some of these things. People being able to use basic accessibility features on Windows with our product that ships inside of Windows is really, really important to us. So that is something that we think will very likely make its way back, in addition to shipping with PowerShell core. So definitely, if you're not already, install PS Readline 2.0 with the pre-release flags off of the gallery. I use it every day. It's great, but we still need to productize it and get it up to final quality. So, yep. Has anybody got anything else? Awesome. Well, last minute but not important. Here we go. Those are the best sorts of things for the last 2 minutes. Can we use pipeline on the next line as a continuation character? Ooh.
Yeah, I remember this was talked about a bit. Bruce, since you're on the call, I don't know if you're familiar with this particular issue, but the request is to use the pipe as a continuation character rather than the backtick.
Sorry, I had to get my mic unblocked.
You're good.
Now I have to find the RFC again.
I'd be super worried about the interactive. Yeah, like Jason says, in a scripted. But from an interactive perspective, it would be impossible.
Well, yeah, from an interactive perspective, well, just in general. So if the last character on the line is a pipeline symbol, then it auto-completes. You don't need a backtick. So in the first example, J. Cool's first example, if after get process you put the pipeline symbol, and then new line where pipeline symbol, new line format table, it works that way.
Yeah, you can do this. You can do this today. I'll type it in get.
But if you want it at the beginning, so it's more readable.
No, I'm typing it here. Hang on a second. If I can get it.
But it's ambiguous. Is get process it? So the way PowerShell works is the end of line state terminates the statement. So get process is a complete statement and gets evaluated. It's only it's only if the statement is incomplete that it continues to do the parsing.
Correct, but this is already how if else works.
Pardon?
If you do if statement and then close brackets, new line, it'll evaluate that and never get to the else, and you'll error out in the prompt.
That's because if is a keyword.
Yeah,
right.
These are
If
commands.
it's part of the language, commands are not part of the language as such.
Yes. So while I understand the desire to have all of these pipe signs all line up very nicely, it's not needed. You can actually have the indentation as I've written in the chat. So you just have the pipe at the end of the line rather than at the beginning of the line. If the pipe actually makes having it line up like that is something that appeals to you, there's not much I can do for it. But you can actually do the way I've typed in the chat, where the pipe is at the end of the statement rather than at the beginning of the statement.
That works in the prompt, but not in a script, correct?
And this works in both. No, it'll work everywhere. What I've typed in the chat will work everywhere.
Yeah, the way the prompt works is that it throws an incomplete parse exception if the statement you've typed in is not complete, and that tells the command reader that it should read some more text to try and complete the command. So it'll keep reading lines until it gets a complete command.
So I think in the interest of time, maybe Bruce and Jim, you two can respond to that issue 3020 and just add some more details.
Sure.
I have to go to another meeting, but thanks everyone who joined the call today.
Yeah, thanks everybody so much. Like I said, I have a couple action items to follow up on with Christoph and Darwin, so I'll codify those here and make sure they get done, and I will we'll try to get this up with the recording by tomorrow. Thank you everybody again, and if and when we open up one of those committee calls or have a transcript ready or something, we'll definitely tweet it out, let you guys know, maybe post it to the community call repo. So thanks again everybody. It was a really productive call today.